We're midway through our region pack's journey, and this time we're making a stop in Japan. And this pack is likely very different than what you were expecting, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, but more on that in a moment. First, let's talk about the creators behind the pack. Ryuichi Kaminogi is renowned for creating some of the best Tokyo-inspired assets in the City Skylines 1 workshop. In addition, they put together the Modern Japan and Railroads of Japan content creator packs. I personally love these packs, but especially Modern Japan, which I prominently featured in Verde Beach. Koma is best described as a prolific asset creator. With nearly 300 assets in the City Skylines 1 workshop, they've produced an impressive array of Japanese buildings, props, trees, and vehicles. And Stop at D has also contributed many beautiful Japanese-inspired buildings, vehicles, and props with a particular focus on the Kyushu region of Japan. Now, if you were expecting the Japanese pack to replicate the bustling areas around the Shibuya crossing in Tokyo, you might find yourself a little bit surprised. And that's because this isn't a high-density pack. Instead, it includes a mix of low and mid-density growables, service buildings, and a handful of props. And honestly, I'm good with that. Not all of Japan is Tokyo, and this pack allows you to recreate a variety of cities that replicate other parts of the country. What's more, this pack introduces the very first new zonable commercial district. The pack includes 4 new zones with 231 growables, 16 service buildings, 2 signature buildings, and 6 props. That's 255 assets in total, putting it on par with the German pack in terms of size. And as with the other packs, the quality here is outstanding. While these assets are distinctly Japanese, many of them could easily work in a variety of other builds. So in this video, we'll learn how to get the pack, take a tour of each asset, place the assets in an existing build to see how they fit, and I'll finish by sharing my overall impressions of the pack. And if you're excited to take this trip to Japan, hit the like button. And if you're still busy with the other packs, hit the like button for that too, and let me know what your favorite pack is below. Or leave an emoji representing your favorite pack for the sake of engagement. But before we dive in, I love the holidays. You get to spend time with family and friends, drink a bit of eggnog, and even have some snowball cookies. And seriously, these are the best cookies in the world. Fight me. But that also means it's time to start thinking about gifts for loved ones. My go-to is usually technology that I think is practical, that they'll get use out of every single day, like Raycon's everyday earbuds. Seriously, these earbuds are great. They sound awesome and are incredibly affordable. And they've got great features, such as active noise cancellation, which is a game changer when you need to tune out distractions, and multi-point connectivity, so you can seamlessly switch between devices. And they also have an outstanding 32 hours of battery life. And if that isn't enough, they come with this compact protective case that can give you 90 minutes of playtime with a quick 10-minute charge. And did I mention that this case charges wirelessly? How cool is that? Best of all though, they sound great regardless of what you're listening to. Recently, I've been listening to a bit of Ashes to Amber, some Frank Ocean, and Hall & Oates, and they all sound great with my everyday earbuds. So if you're ready to pick some up, go to buyraycon.com/cityplanner to save big for the holidays and get up to 25% off site-wide. That's right, you get up to 25% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/cityplanner. Huge shout out to longtime channel partner Raycon for sponsoring the video. Now let's get back to it. To download the Japan Region Pack, head to Paradox Mods using the in-game browser or a web browser and search for Japan Pack by City Skylines Official. Once you find it, add the pack to a playset and it will begin downloading. Do keep in mind though that this is a very large pack. It's 4.5 gigabytes, meaning that this is the second largest region pack. So if space is a consideration, keep that in mind. But with all of that done, it's downloading, so let's hop into the game. Before we take a look at each asset, I wanted to provide an overview of all of the assets and talk about my organization. So these are all of the assets that you get with the region pack set on top of the grid that I created for the UK region pack. So right here, we've got our low density residential, our mid density residential, our low density commercial, and our mixed use residential. Right here, we've got all of our service buildings. We've got our 2 signature buildings right here, our props right here, and then some additional props that you can find using Find It or the dev menu. For the zone building, just like I had with the other pack, I organized all of the assets by their depth. But one of the things that I want to do with this and the other pack is provide what you're looking at right now as a PDF so that you could download this if you want to and use it as a reference when you're zoning things in. So if you want to check that out, head to my website, cityplannerplays.com, and click on the button on the top that says Region Pack Guides, where I'll have downloads for each of the region packs. Now with that out of the way, let's take a look at each asset, starting out with our growables. We'll begin by taking a look at the low-density residential assets. This is only the second region pack that has low-density residential, so I'm really excited to see this here, particularly because there's a lot of them, and I think that some of them are going to be applicable regardless of the type of place you're building. Now, one thing you'll notice right away is that there are a lot of assets of a variety of sizes, with the exception of 5 units deep. So you might want to keep this in mind, because if you zone lots that are 5 units deep or make blocks that are 10 units deep, you're going to have a lot of the same building. Now, one of the ways that the asset creators attempted to compensate for that is that kind of throughout this entire pack, if there are not many assets in a category, the buildings change. So they rotate, they shift around, they have different surfaces. So it's a creative way of making it feel like there are multiple 5-unit deep assets, even if there's really only one. So very, very creative way of handling that. The other thing that's really creative is that there are really 3 different orientations or layouts of lots here. So right here, we've got buildings in the middle. Right here, we've got buildings shifted to the left. And right here, we've got buildings shifted to the right-hand side of a lot. And because of that, you can tell that these buildings right here are basically mirror images of these ones right here. I'm super in favor of that. That is a way to create diversity and make it feel like there are more assets, even though there aren't. Because once you start layering all of the different surfaces and the different orientations of buildings and the different colors of buildings, it starts to feel like there's a lot of variety. And these assets are just completely beautiful. Some of these feel like they could be basically anywhere. The buildings are narrow, which is kind of unique, not something that you would see necessarily in other parts of the world, or it wouldn't be as prevalent. However, some of the assets just kind of look like they could be anywhere. Some of these assets, though, do look very Asian. They do look very Japan. Some of these you might not want to use if you're not creating a Japanese build, but other of these, I mean, these right here look like buildings that could be in my neighborhood. The only real difference is some of the drainage and some of the materials that are used for the assets themselves. Now, one more unique trick that the asset creators use to make it feel like there's more diversity is changing the surfaces as the buildings level up. The first building on the left is the level 1 building, and it has kind of a barren, almost sandy looking surface. The one in the middle is level 3, and it has a forestry looking surface, so maybe not as nice and lush of grass. And then on the right, you have a manicured grass lawn. So that is going to, again, make it feel like there's more visual diversity, particularly when you're viewing the assets from this level, which I really think is neat. It's another really interesting way of signaling to you as the player the level of the buildings, because that's not always easy to figure out. Right here are the buildings that are on the left-hand side of the lot, or at least when you go in to find it, they'll all say left-hand side of the lot buildings. And then to demonstrate the flipping, take a look at these assets right here. You can see that all the buildings are to the left. And if we head over here, the exact same buildings just flipped onto the right. So kind of a nice way of making it feel like there are more assets than there really are. Next up, we've got medium density residential. And I really love these assets, but I do think that they are going to be polarizing. Now, very similar to the previous assets, there are 3 different lot configurations. These right here are the buildings that are in the middle. These are shifted to the left, and these are shifted to the right. There are many 2, 3, and 4 unit deep options for assets, and only 1 for 5 and 6 unit deep. However, they do have that trick involved right here where they're changing the asset type to make it feel like there's a bigger variety of assets, which I absolutely love. So the thing that I think is going to be controversial about these assets is just how stark white they look from above. So you can tell that the roofs here are kind of just glaringly white. And as you zoom in, you'll see why. There's basically, it looks like a metal roof, or maybe it's just some sort of a white shingle. Either way, there's a lot of detail here. There's ripples. It doesn't feel like it's completely flat. But as you zoom out, the level of detail changes and it just looks like a flat white roof. But as long as that doesn't bother you too much, these assets are outstanding. There's kind of an isometric quality to these. It makes it feel kind of like SimCity 4 to me, and I just really love the way that these look. I also don't think that these necessarily scream Japan, so I feel like you could fit these in a wide variety of builds, and they'll look great. And they're just, the sizes are perfect for a mid-rise. It's one of the things that bothers me about the vanilla assets is that they're all way too tall. Now, some of these are very tall for mid-rise buildings, especially at the 4 unit deep buildings. They get kind of big, but if you zone in 2 and 3 units deep right here, that's kind of exactly what I'd expect for a mid-rise building. Now, I want to point out this right here. Some of you might not like what you're seeing. I've seen in the comments that you don't like seeing buildings that just kind of completely change as they level up. But I'm going to tell you something. It's really starting to grow on me because this feels like redevelopment to me. Right here, level 1 building, little tiny building back of the lot. You get a little bit more money, you scrape it. You put up a bigger building and less parking. Makes a ton of sense to me. You get even more money and you scrape the whole thing. You build an even bigger building, something that generates a lot more revenue and more tax dollars. Now, I mentioned the mirrors of buildings. I think you can very clearly see that right here. These buildings that have the sloping roofs, very clearly mirrors of one another. But again, really, really like that. It's a very creative way to add additional diversity to an asset pack. Next up, we have low density commercial. And I didn't expect to be this excited about low density commercial buildings, but here we are. This is the first region pack that has them. And because of that, it feels really, really fresh. And honestly, these assets are great. But I do think that some people, again, are going to take issue with the stark white roof. So if that's a problem, more of it. That said, when you take a look at these, there's a good variety of assets in terms of size, with the exception of 2 units deep and 5 units deep. There are 0 5-unit deep assets here, so don't zone it in. You won't get any buildings, or you'll have a variety of sizes zoning in. Just like the other assets, these are broken up into 3 categories. Here are buildings that are in the middle of their lot, here they're shifted to the left, and here's the mirror image shifted to the right. Now, these assets, I think, are going to work in a variety of contexts, in a variety of types of builds. So I could see these being used in a light industrial area. They kind of have that light industrial vibe. They almost look like they could be in a strip mall. They remind me a lot of Southern California or Arizona, and clearly they could be in Japan. It's a Japanese asset pack after all. But these are really well detailed. In general, I like that a lot of these assets don't have a lot of parking. So that gives you the opportunity to create your own parking lot or skip it altogether if that's what you want to do. I have a feeling that people are going to use these all over the place. I can't wait to mix these in with industrial assets. I think that they're going to look absolutely outstanding. And honestly, they're kind of boring, which I think is really great. You're not jumping out and screaming out to you a particular building style like the vanilla ones do. So I have a feeling that people are going to use these basically everywhere. Then our final zoning category is mixed use residential. Now, one of the interesting things about these assets is that there are many more 2 and 3 unit deep buildings than there are 4, 5, and 6 unit deep buildings. So if you want to have more diversity and variety of buildings, you might want to go with something of this size. That said, these assets are outstanding. They remind me a lot of the medium residential buildings. So I think that if you were to mix these together, they would look absolutely great next to one another. These are also going to look good whether they're close to one another or separated. I love that there are decorated sides here. So we've got windows on all the sides. And where we don't have windows, we've got bricks. So it's a little bit boring, but it's not as boring as a completely white wall. And it means that I think that there are many more applications that you could use these buildings in. So many of these buildings are going to fit in so many parts of the world. These to me feel like they could be in New York, they could be in Los Angeles, they could be in Japan, they could be in Europe. You could be basically anywhere and see a generic looking mixed use building that looks like this. Now, these are for the most part unique buildings, with the exception of these right here. These are a couple of mirror imaged buildings, but for this category in particular, there's a lot of unique assets. Now again, though, the one unfortunate thing is we have a lot of white roofs here. So as you're out at this level, the roofs look completely white. As you zoom in, you can tell that they are beautifully detailed. It's again an LOD thing, and I think it's out of the asset creator's hands, but it is a thing, so I'm mentioning it. Now, for our recolor test of all the growables, I did something a little bit different today. Based on some feedback from the previous video, I've decided to color each section here differently so you can see what section of the building is recoloring as I apply a recolor to a building. Now, one thing I've got to say is I can't figure out the pattern here. Some buildings allow you to recolor a lot. Some don't let you recolor much of anything. In certain categories, one building will let you recolor and the other 2 will not. Sometimes there'll be just one that doesn't let you recolor. For most of them, you can't recolor the roofs, but then for one random building you'll get to, it's kind of a mixed bag here. Look at this. This is bizarre. No, you can't recolor the roof here. You can right here. You can't right here. This doesn't make any sense to me. So you're going to need to guess and check with these, but for the most part, the assets do recolor nicely, but you're going to find the odd asset that just says, nope, nothing here. You're not going to be able to do anything here. And then you're going to find a random asset that lets you recolor everything individually. Here's a good example of that. I could recolor basically every section of this building along with every single prop right here. I recolored this. Some assets just let you have this level of detail, and that's going to be really important to remember, because one thing I'm starting to realize is assets that let you recolor a lot let you delete aspects of the asset, and assets that don't let you delete things. So it's kind of a mixed bag here. You're just going to have to play with these. Like I said, some of them are very recolorable. I mean, look at these medium density. You can do whatever you want. You can make the gaudiest medium density residential buildings that you can possibly imagine, but you can't change the roofs unless you spawn these couple. Those are the only ones. No rhyme or reason, but that's the test. And now you know. Next, let's move on to our city service buildings. And the first one that we have is a water treatment facility, which is pretty fascinating. I believe that this is only the second asset pack that has a water treatment facility. So this is identical to the water treatment plant with one exception. So the costs are 100% the same. The upkeep is the same. The main difference is the size. So you can see that this asset is smaller, which I appreciate. And it also has no upgrade path, which is kind of something that's universal about these. The upgrade path is less and generally doesn't take you as far, even though the assets are functionally the same otherwise. So you can see that there's no way to upgrade this building. With the vanilla asset, you could add onto it and have sub-buildings to increase the capacity. So just know that if you're adding this one, what you see is what you get. But it is a very nice looking asset and it is very small. I feel like this would fit better in an urban environment, whereas the vanilla version really kind of seems like it needs to be kind of out in the middle of nowhere or on a port. Next up, we have our healthcare buildings. And much like our previous asset, these are basically reskins of the vanilla assets. So we've got a clinic right here and a hospital right here. Now these ones do have an upgrade path, so you can add on the inpatient ward, although this doesn't do anything besides add to the building and add to the employee count. So it makes it more expensive, but it doesn't add any benefits. So I don't know why anyone would add this unless they just want to make the building feel more substantial. For the hospital, you do have another upgrade, but this one adds patient capacity 250. Now the thing to know about these is that, again, the upgrade path is more minimal than that of the vanilla counterpart, even though they cost the same amount. In terms of size, the clinic is basically identical, though with the vanilla clinic, you can add a sub-building to get more ambulances. For the hospital, this one is wild. Look at the difference here. The hospital, the vanilla hospital, is basically the size of both of these assets put together. So I think that the hospital will end up getting a lot of use. The clinic, I'm not so sure about. Next, we have our first garbage management asset in the region pack. And this is just a basic recycling center. Same stats as the vanilla recycling center. The main difference, again, is that there's no upgrade path. So what you see is what you get. In terms of size, though, it is much smaller. So if you're trying to sneak this in a very dense city, this is one that you could probably sneak in there. That said, the asset is absolutely outstanding. I think it would really fit in a lot of different areas. And I love that there's already a fence most of the way around this, because that's something that I would absolutely expect to see that in tons of landscaping. And that's actually baked in the asset as well. Next, we have a few education assets that cover the full spectrum of the education pipeline. And I'm a little bit torn about these assets. First and foremost, you might have been seeing it with the look at the previous asset. There is some weird LOD stuff happening right here. And I don't think it is the fault of the asset creator, because I can actually modify this by changing my LOD distance, but it's still incredibly distracting to the point that I don't know if I will use the elementary school and the high school, because this just really bothers me. And it makes me feel bad because when you zoom in, it's incredibly detailed. It's a very nice asset and they've done kind of a killer job on it, but it doesn't matter if it drives you crazy. So that's kind of where I'm at with this one. That said, the elementary school and the high school are basically identical in terms of stats to the vanilla counterparts. So with this one, the big difference is that everything occurs within the footprint of the building. So you have your initial 1,000 capacity. You can add the extension wing on and get 500 more capacity. And you can add on this elementary gym. And again, this occurs within the footprint of the building. Next up, we've got a high school. Same stats as the vanilla high school, 2 upgrades as well. So we've got this extension wing, 400 student capacity added right there. And we've also got a high school gym. Boom. And we have another pool, tennis courts baked into it, and a gym. Boy, oh boy. I really hope that the LOD popping can be resolved, because I would like to use this asset, but for that one thing. Next, we have our college, and this is an asset that I know that I'm going to be using. So this is the same as the college that comes with the vanilla game. It has a couple of upgrades, a faculty building that adds 750 capacity, as well as this cafeteria and store that adds 750 capacity more. And I really like this because it feels like a small campus. There's a bit of parking, which I could see being used for drop-offs or for accessible parking. And if you wanted to add your own, you have the ability to do so. The asset's very detailed, very attractive. And I don't think that it just kind of screams Japan. I feel like you could use this one basically anywhere. And then the final education asset is one that's a little bit unique. So this is the only asset that is not a reskin of a vanilla asset. The university actually has less capacity than the vanilla asset by 2,500 students. I don't know why. It's also the only asset that has a sub-building. So we have our extension wing, adds quite a bit onto the building. I think it looks a lot nicer. But then you also get this university library. This is a sub-building, the only sub-building in this pack. I do like, especially after seeing the content creator packs, that we have the radius around here. So we could place this on a road, for instance, if that's what we want to do, across the street. But it is a little bit curious to me why this is a sub-building. It also doesn't do anything. It costs a lot. So just keep that in mind. The extension wing adds 4,000 student capacity. So this is a great asset in an urban environment. I don't think you could do much better for a university. Next up, we have fire protection assets. So we've got a small fire station and a large fire station. And just like the other assets, these are basically identical to the vanilla assets. The main difference is the upgrade path. We have the garage extension, which adds more fire engines to this building. And for our fire station, we have a garage extension with more fire engines. We also have a helipad, which is great to see. And we have a training facilities. But one thing is conspicuously missing, and that's the disaster response unit. So these are not a direct replacement for the vanilla assets as a result. In terms of size, this is actually quite a bit larger than the vanilla firehouse, and the fire station is clearly much smaller than the vanilla asset, and that is without the vanilla asset having a bunch of sub-buildings, which it does normally. And one thing that you'll notice about these assets generally is it's pretty uneven what you're able to delete from these if you're using better bulldozers. So for instance, if I wanted to delete this little building back here, this little lift of some sort, I cannot do it. I can delete some of the props on the top. I can delete one of the antennas, but not the other one. So don't assume that you can delete any of the signage on these. Most of it is baked into the asset, but it is very uneven. Look at this one. I can delete these off here if I want to, and I can delete decals as well. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Next, we have the police stations. And could the size difference between these assets be any more stark? This is clearly the small police station, and this is the police headquarters. For the police station, we have one upgrade, and it basically just adds a bit more capacity. You get 6 more patrol cars. Otherwise, this is 100% identical to the vanilla police station. The exact same stats, the exact same capacities. And in terms of size, it's just a little bit smaller. Now, this police headquarters, on the other hand, is really something special. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to like to use this building for a couple of reasons. First of all, unlike this building right here, which has a whole lot of Japanese in the front of it, this one doesn't have very much lettering at all. It looks like there's actually only this signage right here. Beyond that, you really can't tell that this is Japanese outside of the size of the building. It has a couple of upgrades. You can add this radio tower, which gives you more patrol cars, as well as this helipad. So again, this is not a direct one-for-one replacement for the vanilla police headquarters, but I think that this one has enough that you could probably replace the vanilla headquarters if you wanted to. The main thing that you're going to miss out on is going to be some of the extra jail capacity. In terms of the size of these assets, the footprint is actually quite a bit smaller. However, this asset is very, very tall. So if you have a large city, this is really going to fit in and going to feel really, really nice in your downtown area. One thing that's worth pointing out with this building, though, is unlike the vanilla police headquarters, you can only place one of these. So if you want to have multiple, you're not going to be able to unless you use mods. Next, we have a couple of administration buildings, and honestly, I have a feeling that many of you are going to like these buildings quite a bit. This is the welfare office right here, identical to the welfare office that comes with the vanilla game. Very small, no Japanese writing on it at all, just looks like a small government office. This is a great asset. I have a feeling that many people are going to use this all over the place. I know that I am. To me, this feels like you can kind of tuck it away anywhere. Again, no upgrades, just like the vanilla one. The only thing that it does is it provides that well-being boost within a radius. And, you know, that vanilla asset is massive, absolutely massive, and it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. It feels like a very imposing structure. This one is not. It's very small. It's a nondescript office with a small parking lot. I think that that is a wonderful asset. The building next to it is the Japanese city office building. So this is basically a city hall. And bluntly, this reminds me a lot of the city county building here in Madison. Just kind of a random looking office building, number of stories tall, government stuff happens in here. And other than that, you might not notice it all that much. So this does not have any upgrades. So if you're looking forward to some of the upgrades that you would get from the planning office or the municipal courts, you're not going to have them here, but you also have a very small asset that has a very small parking lot that doesn't have a lot going on. And I'm guessing I could delete that parking lot if I don't want that here. So that is another benefit of this building if this is something that you wanted to do. You can make this even smaller by getting rid of this if you have a better bulldozer. Now, in comparison to the vanilla city hall, just check this out. The building is actually about the same size as the building when it doesn't have any upgrades, but the footprint is just a fraction of the size. So very nice to have a much smaller city hall asset. Another one of these in here, and I just love all the custom assets that we're getting for the administration buildings. And our final two city service buildings are our communications buildings. And these are interesting in that I'm probably going to use one of these a whole bunch and the other one never. So this post office right here might seem pretty innocuous, but it's a really nice asset. So this is identical to the vanilla post office, and it's really, really small. And when I mention the vanilla post office, I don't mean the small one. I mean its stats are the same as the large post office, except that it's a fraction of the size. And I've always thought that this vanilla post office is way too big, and when you start adding the sub buildings and extensions, it feels way out of scale for an urban area. In fact, we have this in downtown Bend, and I just have really hated the building. So there is a very substantial chance I replace it with this one. That said, this does not have an upgrade path, so you're likely going to want to place more of these. And kind of similar to the welfare office that comes with this pack, I have a feeling you're going to use this one because it's so small and it doesn't stick out. So it's a very nice asset in that regard. Contrast that to this building right here. So this is the communications tower, and it is identical to the vanilla communications tower. The main difference is that it is larger and has no upgrade path. I don't like the vanilla communications tower. It's one of the communications assets that I think is pretty underpowered. It's one that you probably want to replace right away. And if I place this thing, I always increase the bandwidth and I increase the range. It doesn't do a lot, but it does something. And this one right here doesn't give you those options. So not only does it take up more space, but it also doesn't have upgrades. So I probably will never use this, except that I like the way it looks. If I were gonna place this, that would be the reason that I'm placing it, because it looks pretty nice. Now for the recolor test of our service buildings, and the results here are really strange. So we've got our communications buildings, our post office, and our tower here, and they look totally fine, totally normal. They basically only take the red color. Now I've used this exact same color pattern, the same one that we used over there, on the rest of these assets, but for some reason, these ones are pinkish purple. You can make it look normal, but it's kind of tough because the colors are not exactly what you expect them to be. But you can recolor basically all of it, except for some of the add-ons right here. You can't recolor those. That said, the small police station doesn't let you recolor anything. Same thing with the fire stations, but the schools, all of them let you go hog wild. Recolor the buildings themselves, all the add-ons, even the one sub-building that we have, you can completely change the color of basically everything. Moving over to our waste management, you can't do anything there. For the healthcare, you can change the hospital, but not the clinic. And for the water treatment center, you can't change anything. So in general, kind of a mixed bag, kind of weird, but very interesting. I think you're going to be able to do some really unique and cool things with these assets if you like to. The pack comes with 2 signature buildings. Both of these are offices, and because they're offices, they unlock at level 10 when high density offices unlock. They're attractive buildings. They're kind of generic. I feel like you could fit them in basically any city. They are fairly tall, and I do appreciate that the Japanese pack did come with a couple of tall buildings. We've got our police headquarters and these 2 that are pretty darn tall. In terms of the bonuses, it's basically the office signature building bonus. You get an increase in office efficiency citywide, increase in interest in the university, 1% increase in graduation chance, and then a 5 increase in well-being. This one is within a kilometer. This one's within a kilometer and a half. Now, the interesting things about these assets is that they attract the same type of company every time. So this larger building will always attract a software company, and the smaller building will always attract a media company. So if you want to attract those industries into your city, this might be a way to do it. Plop these buildings and you will for sure get them coming into your community. And then finally, I just wanted to point out the attention to detail here. Just absolutely beautiful assets. And this is one thing that for me really sets Cities 2 apart from Cities 1. It's the amount of detail in these assets. Do I need this level of detail? No, probably not. Probably not. Do I appreciate looking at it? I really do. I really do. Really, really beautiful when you can take a look at these assets and really feel the amount of detail and attention that's gone into each of them. So very, very neat. And again, I think that these buildings will fit into a variety of cities. Okay, let's talk about the curious case of props in the Japanese content creator pack. So this is only the second content creator pack that actually has props, yet there's only 6 of them, and they're not very useful. This right here is a bike shelter. We don't have bikes. This is a carport. Then we've got a couple of sheds and then a couple of gates, but no fence pieces. And you might think that that's all that there is. This is what you can find in the menu in a vanilla game, but there's actually many more props. And for whatever reason, you can only access them using Find It, which is kind of a shame. But you can see that there are different fence pieces here, some that even match some of the gates over here, and there's just a lot of them. So if you're using the line tool, you can go hog wild. And again, just like the UK asset pack, I love that these are props and not net lines because it means that they're easier to delete if you make a mistake. It also means that they're going to be a little bit less flexible because they're props and not net lines, but honestly, I much prefer using these. We've also got this fence right here, which if you were going to make like a Top Golf type place, buildings. Imagine using this to line the outside of it. Absolutely perfect. It's the exact same asset that we have for the high school kind of surrounding it. We've also got the pool here from the high school, so if you wanted to place that separately, you could. You also got the high school signs. And then we've got a variety of storefronts. So these are great because if you want a storefront on a building that isn't supposed to have one, plop one of these down and you've got it. And then the last asset is another shed, arguably one that's more useful than the two that you can plop in a vanilla game. So I'm really not sure why these aren't available unless you're using Find It. I mean, I kind of understand the storefronts, but the rest of them, I really don't. But just know that they are there. And if you use Find It and you narrow things down by Japanese Content Creator Pack, all of these will show up. These are also available from the Dev menu. If you go under Props and type in JP, all of these props are available here. You just got to do that little bit of work, and then you can find all these. All of the different fences, they're all available within this menu. And then for our final recolor test, you can basically recolor all of the props and one of the specialty buildings. The major exception are these storefronts right here. You can't recolor anything here, but every other prop, if you really want to recolor fence pieces and place them one by one, that's a thing that you could do. And this larger of the two office towers, this one recolors, and honestly, it does a really great job. I have a suspicion that the reason why is the color of the base asset. You can see it's kind of a grayish, and when an asset is grayish, I feel like it just takes color really well. This is basically the color I'd expect to see. And the nice thing about that is if you want to have a signature tower in the middle of your city and you want it to be a specific color, this asset's going to make it really easy to find that color. This other tower does not let you recolor it at all, so just keep that in mind. This is the only one that you can recolor. I want to do a night test just to see how the lighting is on the assets. Now, one interesting thing about these is in contrast to the UK assets, which had a ton of lighting, you can see that these are a lot darker. And I kind of wonder if that is a regional difference. Because Japan is so urban, I guess I'm a little bit curious to know if there are policies in place to curb light pollution, and we're seeing those policies reflected in these assets. So some of the assets do have more lighting. I mean, this one has a ton, but for the most part, the assets just appear to have a little bit less lighting. But I really, really like the way the assets look at night, just like I like the way they look during the day. Next, I want to do a couple of asset tests. The first test is going to be to see how these assets fit into an existing build. So I want to see how the assets blend into Magnolia County to see if I could use the Japanese assets in this build. Secondly, I want to see if the assets can make vanilla assets feel like they are part of a Japanese city. So we're going to take most of downtown Bend and try to make it feel Japanese by eliminating a lot of the European assets, adding in more density, and then sprinkling in these Japanese assets. So first things first, I just want to start out simple, and I want to convert this shopping center, adding in some of the new Japanese commercial assets. And honestly, they're fine. They look a lot more like the buildings I see around me than the vanilla assets that are in the game. That said, I think if you're going to use these and you want to create some sort of a strip shopping center, you're going to have to choose your assets based on their size. Because you can see that right here, having the parking in the front kind of negates the need for these parking facilities that I added, so they don't make a ton of sense. And then we've got these two corner pieces that have parking in the back. I actually really like that. What I would probably do here to make this feel like it makes a bit more sense is kind of have the middle pieces right here be 4 units deep like these, and that would get rid of the parking. We'd still get our corner pieces with the parking in the back, which I'm okay with. Feels like employee parking. And then I might actually add parking lots in the back or just add some surfaces so that we have, what appears to be some sort of a paved area. In fact, let's give it a go. And I think that this works a ton better. It has that uniform feel you might expect to see in a commercial strip. So I really like the way that these assets look. The one thing I can't help but think about is that this could also double as a whole new zoning category. So if you wanted to make some sort of a light industrial area, this might work out well for you. You could mix these in nicely with offices. You can mix it nicely with industrial, and it would seem like it just blends really well. Or just even have this kind of off from an industrial area as that light industrial area kind of on the outside of it. I think it would really blend well. Next, I want to add a couple of city service buildings over here. So we've got a clinic and a post office. And again, I mentioned earlier that I really have never liked this post office. It feels out of scale and way too large. Let's get rid of this thing, and we're going to replace it with a smaller one. Same thing with this little clinic right here. We'll get rid of that. I'm going to replace that with a hospital. And with that, I've really gained a ton of space right here. Even though I had to shift that road over and redevelop this block, we gained a half a block right here. And then because we had the extension to the clinic over here, I'm gonna add this upgrade. And I wanna see if I can recolor this to kind of fit more the vibe of this area because the yellow isn't doing it for me. And I'll be honest, this is a really difficult building to recolor, and that's because it seems like all of the recolor options are right on top of one another. So if you clear all of these and you decide, let's make this blue. It seems like it should be fairly straightforward. The first color is blue, but it looks really strange. So you modify the second color and you wonder what this one is. And you say, you know what? I want this to actually be yellow. And it changes the color of the entire asset. The funny thing about this is it's backwards for some of these colors. So if I want it to be dark, I have to slide it over to the light. And if I want it to be light, I have to slide it over to the dark. So you can play with these, but they're really strange. So it's going to take a little bit of playing if you want to recolor these. And all three of the colors are all overlaid over the entire building. So you're going to need to mess with all of them to get the exact color that you want. You can start to feel it out though as you're playing. Now, in terms of the way the asset fits in with the rest of the packs, I think it actually does a pretty good job. Now, the architectural style is clearly very different. It is much more flat, and it certainly has a more brutalist look, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And to me, this really retrofits nicely into this urban area. Same thing right here with the post office. Wouldn't really stand out to me as being particularly Japanese from this level, and this honestly is a level that I'm playing the game at most of the time. So I think that this really fits well. And then finally, I want to take on our most difficult challenge in this regard, and this is going to be trying to make some of these Japanese single-family homes fit into an area that has a variety of asset packs side by side. So we've got some North American, just general vanilla assets, European general vanilla assets. We have some French and some German assets. We don't have any UK assets, but you know what? We can fit some in. So I'm going to replace this area right here with some of our single-family homes. I'll add in a couple of mid-rises right here. And I'm going to replace some of these buildings right here with mixed use. And then because I want it to feel very, very mixed, I'm going to also add in some of our UK assets right here. And then we'll just see how it feels once everything spawns in. Now, the assets that we've added right here, we've got our low density residential. Most of them have spawned in with this sandy looking texture. It's fine, but I think that for this particular area, I'd probably want to replace those because it doesn't blend all that well because of that. Now, in terms of the assets themselves, it's spawned a lot of a particular asset that I think looks very Japanese. It's fine. I think I could probably get over it personally, but I don't know that I would necessarily use these mixed in with other assets, not the single family homes. If you're going to place these, you probably want to make a neighborhood and tightly control the assets. Now, the other growables look fantastic. So right here, we've got some of the mid-rises, and these could fit in anywhere. I think I'd want to give them a little bit more room to breathe. So probably another unit of separation in between these. They just are kind of on top of one another, and that just seems a little bit much. The mixed use assets, look at these. Don't know that I love the corner quite as much, mostly because there's parking right there, but these other buildings fit really nicely together. Again, I think that these could probably use one unit of separation. So if you're going to place these, that would probably be my recommendation. But I think that those mix well with basically any asset. They fit basically anywhere. They look like they could be in any part of the world. So wonderful assets. For our final test, we are going to see if we can make vanilla assets feel more Japanese by adding the Japanese assets in here. So we're going to convert basically everything that you can see right here to have Japanese assets, with the exception of some of the specialty buildings, the vanilla towers, and some of the roadway network. We're going to leave that behind. But everything else we are going to convert to be Japanese assets. So let's give it a shot. And there we go. This took me about an hour and 30 minutes. I added a freeway through here and converted so many of the assets. And it looks quite a bit different, but there is one thing that strikes me. As I went through this, and I left a couple, I couldn't get rid of this building. As I went through this, it didn't really feel all that Japanese to me. It kind of felt like different North American. For the most part, these assets kind of just read as generic mid-rises. In fact, you might think that these are some of the mixed use buildings that come with the vanilla asset set, the North American ones. These right here are actually the Japanese mixed use residential buildings. They just look a ton like the ones that we get with the vanilla game. So Not necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that if you're looking something that really screams Japanese, a lot of these mid-rise buildings aren't going to do it, whether they're just the general residential or the mixed-use residential, and they certainly don't make the vanilla towers feel more Japanese. What does are these assets. So these are all the single-family homes, and they definitely feel Japanese. Now, one of the things that I'm feeling now that I've zoned in a bunch of these is that they don't really change colors quite as dramatically as I thought that they would. You might not realize it, but these are all different colors, and I had to really look at this for a while. But this one right here is a tealish color. This one right here is a lighter blue. This one is maybe like a purplish. This one is white. Now, the interesting thing is if you recolor these, they can have bold colors. And when you give them more bold colors, they don't necessarily look as Japanese to me, which I think is really, really interesting. I'm really hoping that the Chinese assets complement these ones well, because as it currently sits, I think you could make a small Japanese town. I think you could make a mid-sized Japanese town. I think it'll be difficult to make a large Japanese city and have it feel super Japanese or super Asian. I think if you overdo it with assets that are vanilla, it's just going to start to feel like a North American build, which isn't probably what you're going for if you're using these assets. And that one more shot in the downtown area, I just wanted to show you what the two signature buildings look like side by side with the vanilla assets, along with that Japanese police headquarters. And just reasonably, they blend really well, but that also doesn't make them feel very Japanese to me. It feels like they could basically be anywhere in the world. So that's good and that's bad. I think that the good is that a lot of people are going to be able to use these. The bad is that these assets aren't going to be contributing to a Japanese build, or at least contributing to making vanilla assets feel more Japanese. I feel like it kind of goes the other way, at least in my opinion. But let me know how you feel about it in the comments below. And with that, we have the Japan region pack. And in general, I feel positive about this pack, but I think I feel more positively about some things than other things. I love the growables. I'm going to use the commercial assets all over the place, as well as the medium density and the mixed use assets. I think that I'm going to use the low density residential probably a little bit more sparingly, but I love those assets as well. I'm a little bit more dubious about the service buildings. Many of these I'm probably not going to use because there are other options that are just as good, if not better. And I'm not sure that I love that you can't add on some of the upgrades that you can add on with the vanilla buildings. That said, some of the assets, like these two right here, I know that I'm going to use, as well as the administration buildings and that post office. They're going to be in basically every single build that I build. And who wouldn't love this police headquarters? This really stands out and feels like an important asset. And I have a feeling that these two signature buildings are going to end up in basically every single one of my builds because they add a really prominent feature to the skyline without completely standing out, which is something that I really appreciate. You got to have buildings like this that are kind of boxy and that aren't signature pieces, because these are the types of buildings that add to a skyline without completely defining it themselves. But reasonably, this is a large asset pack. This is 4.5 gigs. It's approaching the size of the UK pack, and it has about half the number of assets. And because of that, I think that some people aren't going to want to get this one, and they're going to want to consider some of the other packs, particularly if you are space constrained. And as we approach 8 packs, I do think that some people are going to have to choose their spots. So you might have to choose the kind of city that you're building, or specific assets within these packs that you like and that you want to incorporate into your build. You won't be able to just add all of them because they're going to be really large. Otherwise, you could be like me and dedicate most of your hard drive to City Skylines, because that's what I intend to do. And with that, we're going to leave it here. And I really hope that you enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing. You decided to hang out with me and go over this region guide, which I appreciate. I also want to thank the creators of this asset pack. The assets are very nice, and I would highly recommend you go and support them. Check out the assets, leave a like if this is something that you enjoyed. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.